Hi, hello, and welcome back to Rebel Unicorn Crafts. Today we're on day 6 of the 12 days of tips and tricks to help you improve your fluid painting. And today we're tackling color choices and how choosing the right ones will help your paintings pop. Let's first explore some of my paintings. Some of these are my previous tests and some of my personal paintings. And let's talk about why I like some of them better than others. Let's start on a high note with one of my favorites. I really like the contrast between the colors. You can clearly see the difference of each of those colors in that painting. And I also really like that kind of monochromatic color scheme. That's just one of my personal preferences. Next are the paintings I did earlier in this series, and this color scheme has potential, but I missed it by using colors that were too similar. Allow me to redeem myself a little bit with this one I painted when I tested Sargent paint, and I really like the color contrast and the unique color combinations in this painting. Next up, we have two sets of two paintings. I did both of these sets when I was testing distilled versus tap water, and in my first painting, I really like how kind of ethereal it is. It looks like something that would be on a planet, but you have to get pretty close to actually see the difference in colors, whereas in my second test, when I used that pink as well as some of the black and some of that crazy yellow color, it really pops a lot more, and I think it's a lot more interesting. I think that color theory, while it's well studied, is highly subjective, so if you disagree with any of these color schemes or statements, you do you. Go ahead and do what pleases your eye, your home, and your practice best. With that out of the way, let's get on to tip number 1. Use high contrast colors. In case you're like, okay, that's great, but what does it mean to use high contrast? In order to do that, let's first define something, and that is tone. So tone in painting refers to the relative lightness or darkness of a color. So think of the difference between a royal blue and a pastel blue. They can both be based on the same color, but one has a lot more white in it and therefore a different tone. This doesn't apply just to having two of the same color with more or less light or darkness in it. It can be across colors. Let's take this color palette for example. In it we have two different blues, a green and a purple, and yet they all kind of look similar because they're a very similar tone. I took them from the same area on the color wheel, even though they are wildly different colors. However, if I go in here and I either just change just the lightness or darkness of each of these, so let's make this one a lot lighter of a tone. Let's make the green more saturated or a darker tone, and let's even bump up how dark that other blue is to pull it further away from our first blue. And just by making a few tweaks along the lightness and darkness, look how much that color palette has improved. Let's go back to a monochromatic palette. So here I have 3 boxes with the exact same color. One I'm going to make a lot lighter, and then one I'm going to make a lot darker. And that's already a really interesting color palette. This is something I would like to probably work with, except I would make a few tweaks to it. One, I might make one of those blues more green, but the other is I would probably add in a white and a black so that I got both spectrums of both the most light and the most dark I can possibly get in here. So let's see, when I add that black and white and I mix these colors up together, look how interesting that color palette is. And all we're working with is one color and some lightness and darkness. It's just about contrast. Okay, that's quite enough about contrast. Let's move on to tip number 2, which is to use a pop of color. So, last night I did these two paintings. It's technically one, but I did make a little tape barrier in the middle because I wanted them to be on the same canvas, poured relatively at the same time. And I made a color palette that's really similar to the ones that we reviewed. It's one of my favorites to use. Some different blues of different contrast values, one that's a little more green. I really like this color palette, but check out on the right how much, at least subjectively to me, the painting improves when I add just the tiniest amount of this bright pink color to it. Man, I went from really liking this painting to loving it. Often I don't necessarily add that pop of color right into my dirty cup or whatever I'm doing. I will often add it on top so that it's prominent, but it's light-handed and I can control how much there is. So what I typically like to do when I work on these is I will kind of get the paint about where I want, but I don't want to completely move all the paint off so that it won't have any movement. I add the pop of color paint in the middle of this process so I can continue to move and it will actually kind of move with it and become part of the painting rather than just being what's on top. What do you think? Do you like the pop of color? It doesn't have to be pink. Here is the same color scheme, but with like a bright yellow chartreuse color. I think that would be super cool too. Tip number 3 is to get some color inspiration. You don't have to come up with these combinations on your own. For example, my beach pour one that I did for a couple videos ago, I was obviously thinking about a beach, and I think the colors worked beautifully together because I used that as an inspiration. So consider some of your favorite things to look at, use those as color inspirations, or consult an online source or a book. I've got a bunch of books, but I'd like to recommend an online source that's free and easily accessible. And that is the Adobe Color Wheel. And you can find that by just searching Adobe Color on Google, or you can actually go to it's color.adobe.com. Once you're there, there are all sorts of fun tools. You can create your own color palette. You can also explore, and they're going to talk about some of the Pantone favorite colors and some of the color palettes that they suggest. They also have this cool tab for trends where you can actually see different trends in different industries and different subjects, and they actually take the image and they pull out the key colors from it so that you can see what colors you'd want to distill down if you were, trying to see a sunset or something like that. And then you can also play further with your own color palette. So you could start with one color you really like and try it out in different types of color schemes. And this is something you're just going to want to play with to see what you prefer, what you like, and also start to get to know what works together. I typically usually end up in, the monochromatic ones, or also I really like triad color schemes too. So, these are my tips for improving your color choices in your fluid painting. I think fluid painting is like at least 50% just what colors you put on there. So if you improve the colors you're going to put on, you're going to see a huge difference in your practice. I think this might be one of the best tips in the series or the video series is improving your color. If you've got any questions on this, feel free to ask me in the comments. I'm not a color expert, so I will have to answer to the best of my ability, but if I can help, I will try. I'd also like to know in the comments below what some of your favorite color schemes are. And if you'd like to share any of your favorite color paintings with me, feel free to do that through my Instagram at Rebel Unicorn Crafts or at Lacey Walker Art. I hope that you have a magically creative day.